Cozy Powell was a force of nature behind the drum kit, a musician whose name became synonymous with power, precision, and an unmistakable style that elevated every project he was part of.
How famous are you, Cozy?
Well, I was famous about 10 minutes ago, but unfortunately we've left the pub, so here we are.
Over a career spanning more than 3 decades, he played on at least 66 albums, worked with some of the biggest names in rock, and left an enduring legacy that continues to shape modern drumming. His approach blended the sheer physicality of hard rock with the technical finesse of jazz, producing a style that was as controlled as it was explosive. Born Colin Trevor Flux in 1947, Powell grew up in Cirencester, Gloucestershire. Like many of his generation, he was drawn to the drums after hearing the rock and roll explosion of the late 1950s and early 60s, but his influences stretched far beyond the popular music of the day. He absorbed the sounds of jazz greats like Art Blakey and Jimmy Cobb, whose sense of rhythm and dynamic shifts became part of his own playing. At the same time, he was captivated by the sheer presence of rock drummers who dominated stages across the UK and the US. One of the most defining influences on Powell's drumming was John Bonham. Bonzo had that feel, that weight behind every hit, Powell once said, but he also had a groove. That's the key. Bonham's influence on rock drumming was immense, but Powell wasn't interested in simply copying his approach. Instead, he took the elements that made Bonham's playing so effective: his use of triplet fills, his heavy foot on the bass drum, his ability to create a massive sound with minimal effort, and adapted them to his own more disciplined style. Blakey's influence was another crucial piece of the puzzle. As a bandleader and drummer for the Jazz Messengers, Blakey played with an intensity that was almost percussive storytelling. Powell admired that fire. Blakey played like he was leading a charge. He once remarked, "It wasn't just rhythm, it was direction." Powell took that philosophy into the rock world, where his drumming wasn't just about keeping time, but driving a song forward with purpose. Jimmy Cobb, known for his subtlety and finesse, might seem an unlikely influence for a drummer associated with power and aggression, but Powell appreciated the nuances of jazz playing. "It's not always about hitting hard. Sometimes it's about knowing when not to hit," he said. That lesson was evident in his ability to shift seamlessly between restraint and full-force playing, something that set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Beyond jazz and rock, Powell also admired the work of Hal Blaine, one of the most prolific session drummers in history. Blaine's playing was precise, adaptable, and consistently in service of the song. Powell, who would go on to work extensively as a session musician, understood the importance of fitting into a track rather than overpowering it. Blaine made everything groove, but he never got in the way, Powell observed. That approach can be heard in Powell's work with bands as varied as Rainbow, Whitesnake, and Black Sabbath. Perhaps one of Powell's most direct influences came from Carmine Appice, the drummer for Vanilla Fudge, Cactus, and later Rod Stewart. Appice was a showman, a pioneer of the heavy rock drumming style that predated even Bonham's rise to prominence. Powell and Appice were friends, and their mutual admiration was well known. Appice's use of double bass drums, thunderous tom rolls, and a commanding presence behind the kit left a clear impression. Carmine was doing things nobody else was doing at the time, Powell said. He had this huge sound, this attitude. Years later, Vinny Appice, Carmine's younger brother, would take up Powell's own Yamaha Maple Custom Absolute drum kit for Black Sabbath's The Dio Years project, further cementing the link between these drummers across generations. Powell's legacy was one of continuity, a bridge between different eras of rock and metal percussion. Powell's career took off in the early 1970s, when he joined Jeff Beck's group and contributed to the albums Rough and Ready and Jeff Beck Group.
I loved Cozy. I picked him out of a lineup of 20-odd drummers.
His drumming on tracks like Situation showcased his ability to blend groove with power, a balance that would define his playing for years to come. Even in the context of Beck's fluid, jazz-inflected guitar work, Powell's drumming remained precise and driving, never overplaying, but always maintaining a sense of momentum. Rainbow provided Powell with his next major platform. Ritchie Blackmore, fresh from his departure from Deep Purple, wanted a drummer who could match his own intensity, and Powell delivered. His work on Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll was a masterclass in heavy rock drumming. Tracks like Stargazer featured some of his most memorable performances, combining pounding rhythms with intricate fills that built tension and released it with dramatic effect. That track was like a war march, Powell recalled. Everything about it had to feel massive. By the late 1970s, Powell's reputation as one of rock's most formidable drummers was firmly established. He formed his own group, Cozy Powell's Hammer, before going on to work with a series of high-profile acts, including the Michael Schenker Group, Whitesnake, and Black Sabbath. His ability to adapt to different bands without losing his distinctive sound was one of his greatest strengths. He could lock into a tight groove when necessary, but he could also explode with ferocity when the song demanded it. Working with Whitesnake on Slide It In demonstrated his versatility. The album marked a transition for the band from blues-based rock to a harder-edged, more polished sound, and Powell's drumming played a crucial role in that evolution. His playing on Slow and Easy was deliberate and restrained, allowing the song to breathe. While tracks like Guilty of Love displayed his characteristic driving energy. His time with Black Sabbath further cemented his legacy. Joining the band for Headless Cross and Tear, Powell helped shape a heavier, more dramatic sound that blended traditional metal with elements of gothic grandeur. Tony Iommi, the band's guitarist and founding member, praised Powell's contribution. Cozy had that incredible presence. He hit hard, but he was always in control, Iommi said. He understood exactly what Sabbath needed. Powell continued working throughout the 1990s, collaborating with Brian May and returning to play with Black Sabbath for a brief stint. His ability to shift between projects without ever losing his identity as a drummer was part of what made him so respected. He wasn't just keeping time, he was shaping the sound of the bands he played with. His untimely death in 1998 marked the end of an era, but his influence lives on.
I miss him as a brother. We had such an amazing time together.
Dave Grohl, a drummer who has cited Powell as a key inspiration, praised his sense of precision and power. Cozy played like every hit mattered, Grohl said. Lars Ulrich, known for his work with Metallica, pointed to Powell's sheer energy. He had that attack, that presence behind the kit, Ulrich observed. Mike Portnoy, whose technical prowess has been celebrated in progressive metal circles, credited Powell with demonstrating how a drummer could combine finesse with aggression. Powell's drumming wasn't about showing off, it was about impact. He understood that rhythm was the backbone of any great rock track, and he played with an authority that demanded attention without ever overshadowing the music itself. His ability to switch from thunderous fills to a tight, locked-in groove set him apart from many of his contemporaries. His legacy is one of precision, strength, and musical intelligence. The drummers he admired, Bonham, Blakey, Cobb, Blaine, and Appice, each left their mark on him, but he transformed those influences into something entirely his own. His playing continues to be studied, imitated, and celebrated, not just as a relic of rock's golden era, but as a benchmark for what great drumming should be.